All right, let's reconvene for our wrap-up session of the day. I know you're having some fire conversations, but we have to get on with the final panel that I know for a fact you will not be disappointed in hearing. This is a phenomenal panel. So what we're going to talk about as we reconvene in this particular panel, which I'm very excited about because I like practical. How many of y'all like practical? I know our guests who have been watching, practical's good, right? We like skills, we like the how-to. So we're going to talk about in this panel capacity building for resilience in young athletes. So we're going to talk about how-to. So if you're taking notes, this is a panel that you definitely need to be taking some notes for in particular. And I get the esteemed privilege of introducing my colleague and friend, Dr. G. So let me tell you a bit about Dr. G. Deborah Gilboa is a board-certified family physician and internationally respected resilience and youth development expert. An alum of Carnegie Mellon University, the University of Pittsburgh Medical School, and the Second City Improv Theater in Chicago.
Really?
See, that's well-rounded. She's the author of several books, including From Stress to Resilient. It's due out this spring. Mark that down. She's been a volunteer coach for soccer, volleyball, and gymnastics, but never for anyone over the age of 7, and is the mom of 4 boys who've managed to be involved in 11 sports over the past 15 years. She herself dreads most exercise, but does it anyway. There's a nugget in that for somebody. So please join me in welcome our esteemed moderator, Dr. Deborah Gilboa.
Thank you so much for joining us for this part of the conversation. And we have the opportunity to bring this home with the how-tos, with what do I actually say? What can I actually do in these difficult situations? So first, let me introduce the 2 amazing people that are joining me for this conversation. Dr. Jen Hartstein is the owner and founder of Hartstein Psychologic Services in New York City. She has a doctorate in school-child clinical psychology, among other advanced degrees. And she works every day with students and their parents and their counselors and their coaches who are dealing with intense emotions. Chris Kurd is the founder and commissioner of the Pittsburgh Flag Football League. He was a 4-year member, and, scholarship member and team member of the football team at the University of Pittsburgh, where he is a graduate. He went on to several AFL teams and then a brief stint with the Atlantic Falcons. And even more exciting from my point of view, for the last dozen years or more, he has been an incredible advocate for student athletes, working with kids at every level in so many different sports, and finding, in his words, a way to involve kids and parents in a sport that doesn't go anywhere except to life. Mm-hmm. He is also a dad of 3 kids who engage in sport. So coming at it from all the different lenses that we see this as a sports administrator, as a coach, and as a parent, as well as an athlete himself. Thank you for being here. We have to figure out how to help people who have been engaging with us all day find the couple of things that they're gonna do first.
No small task.
Right? And that's gonna be different for everyone. So I think our job is to just create a laundry list of strategies so that you can pick a couple that makes sense to you, given your situation, given your skill set, given your athletes, given your needs. What we are here to talk about is how we build capacity for resilience. So I want to start by defining that. And I define it using a more broad definition than you might be familiar with. A lot of people, when I ask students, and I'm lucky enough sometimes to work with students, so I'll ask a group of 4th and 5th grader, they've heard it. What's resilience? And they tell me, bouncing back from something hard. And I say that is 100% true if you're a rubber band. Are you a rubber band? They all say, no, we're people. Right, okay. People are affected by change. People are affected. We don't bounce back to where we were. Resilience is the ability to navigate change. Not just the hard stuff. Not just the stuff we didn't want or the stuff that surprised us. It's the stuff that is changed. Any change requires resilience. The ability to navigate change. Now, it's not real resilient if I navigate being broke by robbing a bank. It's maybe problem solving, but it's not resilience. Resilience is the ability to navigate change and come through it with integrity and purpose. Or to put it in terms that makes a lot of sense to the middle schoolers I work with, come through it the kind of person you want to be. The ability to navigate change and come through it the kind of person you want to be.
In line with your values.
Right. So with that context, let me ask you go way back to the beginning of our conversation and say 45 million US kids are engaged in organized sports. 45 million, and that count was as of 18 months ago. Okay. 25,000 go on to be elite and professional athletes. Less than 1/100th of a percent. So let's assume that having the next very best athlete in something isn't the only reason that adults get kids involved in sports. I hope it isn't, because we're going to be wrong so very often if that's the main reason.
Yep.
Why do parents sign kids up? 45 million families sign their kids up for sports.
Well, I'll jump in. I think that there's a huge benefit. We've talked a little bit about it, right? There is physical health benefit. There is mental health benefit. We know exercise, movement boosts endorphins. Endorphins improve our mood. That happens at any age. We know that that's an important piece. And then it teaches things like cooperation, leadership, teamwork, all things and goals and values that I think almost everybody watching, all of us sitting here can say are vital in the lives of young people, because what do? They teach us how to be good employees. They teach us how to be good leaders in an employee space or in a workspace. They teach us how to be good friends, good parents,
roommates,
good anything, right? Collaboration is a key part of being on a team, and we need that in every element of our lives. So I think, kids need to be involved in and it doesn't only have to be sport. Theater can teach you the same thing, right? Anything that is organized in a way that brings a group together.
But I do think there's something that's particular about sport.
For sure.
So Chris, you deal with hundreds of parents a month for your sins.
Definitely.
And I'm wondering, why do they get their kids involved?
So I would say probably some of the top reasons are, number one, social acceptance. I want my child to not only be socially accepted on the court, on the field, in the pool, whatever that sport is, but also in the classroom and then overall in life. The next thing I'd definitely say that in my time in coaching, both as a flag football coach, tackle coach, and an administrator, is to have fun. Kids want to actually have fun, and the parents want them to have fun. The challenge comes in my opinion, and Dr. Patterson touched on this a little bit, and many of the other guests today spoke about this too, is when parental expectations. So not just only expectations should be required for coaches, and first and foremost, just before I talk about parental expectations, thank you to all the youth and high school coaches and administrators that are out there doing this thing. And I want to make sure I stress before the word coach comes, oftentimes it's volunteer. Yep. Okay, it's volunteer coach. And this is one of those things that gets overlooked. Quite frankly, many people can't give the time to do it like they used to. Now, when it comes to parental expectations, the question really becomes, what does a parent expect the sport to give to them? And is that sport actually aligning with that? And sometimes those expectations are unrealistic. They want to see their child become the next Michael Vick or the next LeBron James or the next, top star swimmer. And when it doesn't happen overnight, that's when things go south. And unfortunately, this is where we're starting to see somewhat of a decline in that 45 million number that you talked about in overall participation. So it's our job to actually do what we can as coaches and administrators to get that number back up, get them back involved.
So if a parent comes to you and says, oh, you know what, listen, my kid played flag football last year, but it's clear to me that they do not have a ton of raw talent about this, so I'm gonna pull them out, we're not gonna do it anymore. What would you say to them to encourage them?
The first thing I would say is, what does raw talent look like? And I would pause. Because oftentimes what I found is that parents are comfortable speaking with their child who's maybe in 4th or 5th grade. They're comfortable talking to their teacher about math or how they're doing in English. But as soon as it's talk to the football coach or talk to the basketball coach, they don't want to say anything. They don't want to oftentimes, give any critique or even just ask basic questions like, hey, how does this work? And so if a parent says something like that to me, first thing I would say is, well, what does it look like to you? I'll tell you what I think from my, X amount of years of experience, but for you as a parent, what does that look like? Oftentimes you'll be surprised. They themselves don't actually know, and so what do people do by default? They equate it down to the scoreboard, wins and losses. And that's not necessarily what's the most important thing at the most youngest levels of sports.
And I think it's important to ask what their child wants. Maybe their child just is having so much fun and it's joyful, but the parent doesn't see the raw talent or doesn't see why, because let's admit, right, if your child is involved in team sports, you as the parent are involved in team sports by default because you have to take them to practice, pick them up from practice. I mean, I know when I was growing up and involved in sports, because I lived in a small enough town, there were lots of us on the same teams, we carpooled, right? But not everybody has that ability to create a community, to go back to community where we're all working together to get to practice, pick up from practice, do all those things. But what if your kid loves flag football, even though they'll potentially have the least amount of talent on the team, but they just love it? Why pull them out if it's something that's bringing them joy, which has a direct correlation to positive mental health? I'm engaged, I'm filling my joy bucket. And that's great for me because then I learn something that I enjoy doing that helps me build meaning in my life that I can take as I get older. So I think that's an important thing to think about.
If I, as a coach, see, you know what? You're right. I think that your child's ball handling skills this year with their physical development are never going to be stunning in the next couple of months, but their ability to take feedback, their ability to cheer someone else on, their ability to run an extra lap when they don't feel like it is growing. How can I communicate that to a parent in a way that will make that parent see the value of everything they get from sport, not just that particular athletic skill?
I think at this pure foundation, you've got to start with continuous improvement. And this has been talked about in many different angles throughout the course of today. And I think anybody who's an educator of any kind, any level, a coach of any level, knows that it is about the process. Now look, the reality is at the youngest levels, kids just want to participate. They want to have fun with it. They want to actually be included. They want that social acceptance. But as they grow and as kids start to identify those sports that they're enjoying, working with and playing and getting better, they got to start to love the process. Parts of it are going to become hard, but as long as you're focused more so on the improvement, every single time you take the field, the court, the pool, the diamond, whatever it may be, then the outcomes are always going to be better. If it's only solely focused on the wins and losses, and sadly, this is what I see even at the lowest levels. And when I mean lowest, I'm talking about we have a 4- and 5-year-old division in our flag football league back home in Pittsburgh.
It's adorable.
And one of the challenges, we get some parents a little overzealous. That's probably the most, excited division we have in our league. We go up to 15. Coach, we noticed that it's all ties on the scoreboard. It's 28-28 every week. What's their record? Doesn't matter. They don't know where out of bounds is. Okay, they don't know if they're on offense or defense. So
they run on moss.
Exactly. So the first thing I tell them, I said, look, I set the expectations the very first week. I said, what we are going to do is we're going to modify this game of flag football, which is already modified down from tackle football. So we're going to modify it even more. Most important thing is we're going to learn about self and others. That is something that I taught from my wife, who's been an educator for close to 20 years. And then the second thing we're going to talk about is boundaries. What are you? I'm on offense, I'm on defense. Where are the boundaries at? If you're out of bounds, you're a non-participant. Stay in bounds. Keep it basic that way. As long as the kid can know that and understand that, it grows every single time, every sport you play and get involved in.
And I think it's a life lesson, right? I think as we've heard some of the panels talk about, it's about kind of the process, not always the outcome. And I think talking to parents about the fact that look at all the skills your child is learning. They are showing grit. They are showing perseverance. They are showing commitment. All values that I think many parents want their children to have, right? They aren't like, oh, I'm not good at it, so peace out, I'm done. And there's no kind of follow through and then kind of that building of fortitude that I might not be the best player, but I'm the best cheerleader for my team. And I think what better example did we really see of that over the Summer Olympics, right? Simone Biles had to pull out. She might be the GOAT, but she still showed up to be the cheerleader, which I think shows a great leader, but I think what a great message to kids. Like you don't have to be the best, but are you the one on the sidelines kind of flailing I love watching college basketball and the guys that are never getting in, right? They're the guys that get beat up in practice, but they're the guys on the sideline cheering the loudest because they know that's what's needed. And I think what I would say to parents, and I say this in my practice with a different model, but of what are we seeing that's changed? What's like the just noticeable difference towards growth, even if it's not perfection? And perfection is unattainable, right? So I think it's important to say to parents, yeah, they might not be the best, but look at their strengths, to go to the compliment sandwich kind of idea. What are their strengths we're observing?
Okay, so the compliment sandwich was brought up as a strategy to use to communicate with our athletes. Give me an example.
Sure. And I'm going to add to it. So the compliment sandwich, just as a recap, is we want to start with the strength, kind of here's how you're doing. What do I need to see be different, change? What do I need from you? And then kind of wrap it up with a nice summary. And there's one really important semantic thing we have to think about in this. Very often what we do, and then I will give you a clear example, is we say something, 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 but here's the thing I need from you. You have just taken anything positive away. Our brain can't hold those two ideas in our head. Semantically, we want to use and. Here's the example. Hey, you did a great job, Deb, in practice today. You worked so hard. But I'd really like to see you do a little bit more skill work on your passing game, because I think that'll really help, us win the game a little better.
I walk away from this conversation, all I remember was what was said after the word
Was the negative, right?
Yeah.
So if I say, reframing, hey Deb, you did a great job in practice today, and I really want to see you work on that skill work with the passing, because I think it'll really improve your game. How does that sound different to you?
Tremendously. And that sandwich idea, unless you're an open-faced kind of person,
right,
is that you say, and I very much admire this thing you did.
Right.
I wanted to talk for a minute practically about praise. We heard earlier that you get a lot more with recognition than punishment, and it's absolutely true. We also heard athletes say, I want to know that my coach, my parent notices me. They see what I'm doing differently. And we know from research that praise is useful for two things. It makes connection, and it always makes connection. If I praise anything about you, so if I say, oh my goodness, Chris, I love those shoes. The next time you put them on, you'll be like, yeah, I remember Deb loved those shoes, right? It's a connection. But if I want to build confidence, then I have to praise something you have control over, something that you did, not something you are or something you got, like your wife got you those shoes.
Right.
That's her, I'm building her confidence in choosing something that works. So if we want to build confidence, we have to praise something that you have control over. And an example that I use a lot when I'm talking to parents is, if I go up to my athlete and I say, wow, your team killed it out there. You did I am so impressed by that win. You must feel great. When's your next game? The athlete thinks, when's the next game that I'm sure we'll win?
Right.
Because that's what you want to see. If I go up to you and I say, wow, you killed it out there. I was so impressed by your communication and your perseverance and your teamwork and your sense of humor with that tough call from the ref. When's your next game? I'll just tell you when my next game is, because we can always bring that stuff. So we have to praise stuff that kids can control.
And that they can notice, right? I think that's measurable. And that's personal, right? I think that's the other thing. I think, hey, when's your
SMART goals things, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Chris, do you use those?
Yes, we use SMART goals a little bit, and it's funny.
Specificity.
I wanted to touch on the sandwich concept as well, because one of the biggest examples I see of this is in the springtime. So in the springtime, flag football, that's when we get all of our tackle players. I call them the diehards. These are the kids that they're playing football all year round, whether it's 7-on-7 tackle football, flag football. Now they'll sprinkle in baseball, basketball, whatever, but this is a common thing that we see often. I coach the 5 and 6 division because they're the littlest ones and they need the most attention. And it takes a certain special type of person to do it. And I'm not the specialist, but
well done.
Thank you.
We appreciate you.
But essentially, when they get the tackle kids in, they're coming with tackle habits. And so it's tough to try to unlearn it, but we say, look, go on top of it. One of the most common things we see is this. Kids run with the football, kids on defense, runs up, this is flag. He's supposed to be pulling the flags. He doesn't. He actually tackles him. Now, there's no equipment involved, but it's a great tackle. I've said this 1,000 times. I will go to a child and go, listen, that was a heck of a tackle. Like, if we were out here playing tackle football right now, your coach would be proud of you. That was amazing. However, we are playing flag, and what do you got to do? I got to play the flag, coach. Excellent. So next time, as you put yourself in position, just pull his flag. Okay, coach.
Right.
And just like that, it's over. And just like that, it goes right on top of what you were saying from before. And it's one of these things where, as you're instilling confidence in the game of football, unfortunately, I see this all too often for those of you who are involved within the tackle community, the youth level. Many kids, unfortunately, are being coached by coaches that their intentions are always in the right space, always. I truly believe that 100% of the coaches, your intentions are in the right space. However, your execution might not be updated, or it may just be overall poor. And so what you have is grown men screaming at little kids, trying to train them like pit bulls. And this is happening today. This is today. And oftentimes this happens because, quite frankly, you haven't had that continuous education as a coach. And so it's an opportunity really now to start to and this is not just for football, this is for all sports, taking ourselves back and saying, okay, how can I improve as a coach, whether it be for mental health and wellness or also the physical implementation and the scheme for what it is I'm doing in my sport. Quite frankly, I don't think many of the coaches that are out there at the young levels are doing that. And this is where, TrueSport, USADA, with the resources they're having, this is where they need to step in.
And I think shame-based interactions, which is kind of like the old school,
Yes.
is really a form of punishment. And what we know as, and what I know as a behavioral psychologist is punishment doesn't teach new behavior. And I think that bears repeating, right? Punishment doesn't teach anything new. It teaches us what to avoid. It teaches us maybe how to be sneaky. It teaches us how to be like the kid who didn't go touch the line and kind of learned how to win because he cut a corner. It doesn't teach anything new. Reinforcement, reward, what am I working towards? Teaches new behavior. It lets people know what you want from them. So shaming someone shuts them down, whereas rewarding and praising and encouraging someone, not falsely, because kids will see through your BS faster than anything.
Absolutely.
It has to be real and genuine, so do not do it if it's not genuine. But that's where Gracie was talking a lot about this morning about validation. How do you see them? How do you hear them? How do you promote them? Will build up that confidence and increase their engagement. Shame will shut them down, and that's why we lose kids. They quit. Because it doesn't feel good to them.
And unfortunately, just to kind of piggyback on what you're talking about, within certain athletic communities, shaming was the way that a lot of us were brought up. I mean, I'm 41, and I think many people in the room that have coached or been administrators, that was the way to do it. Oh, you don't want to do it? That's fine, we'll just run suicides. Oh, you don't want to do this? That's fine, we'll just do this extra thing. I mean, literally, I had a coach in Little League tackle football where if you were talking, the person you were talking to, you both had to hold hands and run stadium stairs. And I was probably 8, 9 years old. But this was one of those ways of where they would try to pound out of you any sort of behavior they didn't want. So punishment, you're right, it doesn't
And what
change.
are you remembering? You're remembering the negative. You're not necessarily
100%.
remembering the positive.
I don't even remember what the conversation was.
Right. What a shame.
Chris, you coach coaches.
Yes.
To coach.
Yes.
And so do a lot of people who are with us in our audience today. So when you say, I know that there are coaches who are not executing this well, how do you approach coaches with that empathy that you have? You believe 100% they want what's best for their athletes. Their heart is in the right place. How do you impart the skills that they need respectfully so that volunteer coaches, this is not their day job maybe even, can hear you? So
one of the first things I explain to coaches, and typically every season, we'll do 1 to 2 trainings, and they're on Zoom or in person. And one of the first things I explain is it's a chart that I made, and one has the traditional sports environment. And in the traditional sports environment, it's an infographic. It says, okay, home team, visiting team, home coaches, visiting coaches, fans. And so there's really, on each of the infographic, there's really only 2 colors. It's like red and blue. That's it. Like everybody's kind of with their tribe. I said, with flag football and the way that we're going to do it here in Pittsburgh with our organization is like this. And it's more so a version of sports socialism in a way. I said, you have all these people that are involved. These are the different stakeholders. I'll put referees, home parents, visiting parents, players, coaches. I'll show everybody in different colors. And then the people that I show in the same color, I say the referees, because I pay them, okay? The coaches, we're all working together to work with the children. And when you break it down like this, it becomes a joint effort where the emphasis on the outcome of wins and losses becomes reduced down to nothing, like little to nothing. Now, I'm not saying that this could work at the highest levels, high school or even junior high for that matter, but if you can put together at least the people that, even though I coach this team and you coach that team, the reality is if you saw my player doing something different or something wrong, you'd correct them and I'd be okay with it. That's how it's supposed to be. At the youngest levels, that's how it has to be. If we don't change the way that we're approaching things in all sports at the youth level, we're gonna see an evolution that we're not gonna like, to where when we get to the point of where kids are reaching that collegiate level, that are fortunate enough, or even high school level, they're not gonna be strong, both physically and mentally. So we've gotta, as administrators, find a different way.
Right, and I think I just made me think about like growing up, right? Your neighbors looked out for you. Everybody kind of if I was doing something wrong, my neighbor was the first one to be like, Jen, stop acting like that. That's not okay. And it was like okay with my parents if someone corrected me, because we were a community. We lived in a neighborhood that was a community, and I think we've lost some of that, and I think we have to start to think about how we are all a community. Our coach, I think this has been the message of the day, right? That a parent, an athlete, a coach, the guidance counselor, the athletic director, whomever, all of the people on the team are our team itself. We are a community, so how are we looking out for each other? So if that other coach on that other team needs to correct my player for acting like a fool, like it's okay, because guess what? Like we're a community. It's not a scolding. It's a, hey, how is that behavior really effective right now? Can we do something differently? And I think that's important to go back to this idea of how are we working together to promote positivity versus like this binary, which doesn't exist, right? We don't exist in a black and white world. I mean, we exist in multiple colors and lots of shades of gray and all these things, and we want it to be red and blue, but that's ineffective. It doesn't work that way.
Can I touch on one more thing? It's so good that you just said that, because that it is non-binary and it actually is not linear. And the challenge with sports is that it's a finite situation, all right? There's a clock. It tells you when the clock is done, the game is over. There's a scoreboard. A winner and a quote-unquote loser will be deemed, whatever the sport is. If it's in swimming or in track, someone's gonna win and lose. It's a finite situation. However, in life, and we're all human beings, so even after sports is over, we're all gonna have to live and live in a positive way. It's infinite. You can't win at business. There's no winning. There's no winning at life. It's a matter of continually improving the process and trying to find a better way to get better. And I think that's so often we're seeing that the competition is being put above any level of improvement. So we're now the focus of wondering if a kid knows where out of bounds and inbounds is has gone out the window. Because now we just want to know, did you win or lose? Because if you lost, then you're just terrible, you know. But if you focus on the fundamentals as they grow, I promise you this: any high school coach, any sport would be over the moon to have a kid that understood the basics and understood that team success brings more eyeballs for individual success. Whereas unfortunately right now, it's being driven home that individual success is gonna bring success for me. and that's not good. It's just not.
This morning, the Olympic athletes were talking about using social media. And they were talking about how it can do a lot of good, and you can use it to build who you are and how you are and what you can do after your sport or outside your sport, but it can use you, right? And I thought, and they said, it's a tool. Well, sport is a tool. We can either use it to create the kind of life I as an athlete want and the abilities that I want to have, or that I as a parent want for my child, and the skills I want them to have and the resilience I want them to have, or that we as a community want to see from our next generation, or we can allow our students to be used by it. And the sports success and the financial success and those pressures can be the ultimate goal. So what I hear you talking about as you talk about centering around is we have to clearly define purpose. I define resilience as the ability to navigate change and come through it with integrity and purpose. If that purpose is winning, then it does not matter who gets grinded up and spit out in the meantime. Then it doesn't matter the who, it only matters the do. If our integrity and our purpose is for elevating that child, and TrueSport talks all the time about how sports is a lab for life. It is that sport is a way, it's a wonderful way, and some would, I think, reasonably argue, one of the best possible ways to get kids through so that they can emerge into adulthood incredibly skilled in so many ways. But if we don't remember the purpose, then we end up centering that binary. We end up centering that scoreboard, those wins and losses.
Yeah.
So we are here all day talking about mental wellness and the youth athlete. And I'd like for you to each speak just a little bit to, I think we have a clear understanding of how sport can undermine the mental health of an athlete. How can we intentionally, and I'm gonna press on you to be specific, how can we specifically use our kids' involvement in sport to improve their mental health?
Do you want to hit it first?
Sure. Okay, so specifically, my top three. I'll give you my top three. Okay, so specifically, how can we help improve their mental wellness? Well, I think just by promoting physical movement, we promote physical wellness.
Yes.
I mean, mental wellness, right? So number one tip is like, just get your kid moving, whatever that might look like, right? So they want to be the manager of the soccer, I mean, in high school. To get out of gym, I was the manager of the soccer team.
Confession moment.
Confession moment, totally, but being the manager of the soccer team got me out of gym. And so I did that. I also played sports, but like this was I didn't have a fall sport, so I managed soccer team. But that also meant I had to do drills with the soccer team and do stuff with the soccer team, which did, and it kept me part of a team. So I was still invested on the periphery. I didn't play, but I was invested. And so movement helps mental health. There's no question, right? So that's number one. Number two, it builds relationships. And I think that that's really important. I have gone back to my high school and done talks to my high school. And until recently, my high school softball coach, I played softball for 4 years, was still there. And I walked in and was greeted with this warm, my nickname in high school was Fruity, long story. If you really want to know, I'll tell you later. But I walk in, she saw me 30 years later, 40 years later, Fruity, big greeting, hello, like so excited to see me. Still has an impact on me. So that relationship, just as an adult in my life, my friends on the team, those are super important. So it builds, and what do we know? Community helps build mental health. What did we see with COVID? So much isolation impacted mental health so negatively. So that community is really important. And thirdly, it does teach, it has the opportunity to teach grit and resilience and commitment. And I think those three things are important life lessons that help our mental health. If I know that I can get through that really bad practice and that really bad game and I'm still okay, I can look at that really bad math test that I failed and not be like, I'm gonna be a failure, I'm never gonna graduate from high school, I'm never gonna be anything, I'm gonna, just live at home and play video games all the time. It can give me the awareness that I can get through anything.
Okay, so those three things I can build when I never win once, which is cool because I never won once as a young athlete.
Yeah, they are not predicated on winning.
I'm just facts. But I'm going to ask you for your answer, Chris. But before we do, I want to mention, I want to do this a little differently with this panel because we're last. I'd like to stop twice during our conversation for your questions. So if you can think right now, and if you're watching us virtually, if you can type in any questions you want us to address before we move on to our next section of this panel, after Chris answers, we're going to have an opportunity for that. Okay, Chris, how does being involved in sport support mental health?
So I would say there's three things in general. Number one is going to be social acceptance. That I'll touch on that a little deeper.
Even if I'm terrible?
Yes, 100%.
Tell me.
And I'm going to tell you why. The second thing is going to be prioritization. So literally as a child, thinking about, okay, what matters to me? And then how do I prioritize my actions every single day around that thing? And then lastly is teamwork. And I know that sounds corny, I know that sounds cheesy, but it still matters.
No, not in this audience. I think
I
agree.
I think you have a good support team here.
Yeah, it still matters above and beyond anything. And so when I talk about social acceptance, I do want to mention this. So one of the things that stood out to me the most, and this was probably happened about 4 or 5 years ago in our organization. So Dr. G knows our organization is actually based in the inner city of Pittsburgh. We've been able to expand it out to different suburban areas. A few years back, when we first started the actual growth process of going into some of the more, some were affluent suburbs, some were just areas where they wanted flag football and they just didn't have it. I strategically put them there because we had parents traveling in. I had a mother pull me to the side because she'd said, no, we're still going to come to the south side of Pittsburgh. We're going to drive in, past Cranberry and come on into the city. I pulled her to the side and said, listen, why are you here? I made this location 5 minutes from your house because I had 80 kids a few years back that were there, and everybody's there, but you're still here. She pulls me to the side and says, Chris, I got to be honest with you. I said, what's that? She said, I didn't grow up the way my kids grew up. She said, my best friend is black. My best friends, my circles that I roll with are from all different backgrounds, both economically, racially, the whole 9 yards. She said, my kids don't grow up that way. I need to have my children around positive black male role models. And I said, oh, okay. Because that was the last thing I expected. I was like, I just thought you were going to say, you worked on the weekends and it made more sense. But it was something that stood out a lot and she said to me, she said, look, the world is not going to be the way that what they see it every day at school. Mm-hmm. What you have going here and what your team is doing down here of both volunteer coaches and staff members is what the real world looks like. And I need to have my child involved with this in a sports environment. And it blew my mind because that's not what I thought we were doing. I was really just trying to work it out logistically to help people and make it work. The second thing, like I said, is was it social? So social acceptance, teamwork. Mm-hmm. What was it?
Prioritization.
Somebody's listening to you.
Thank you. Prioritization. And as a former Division I athlete, one of the things that hit me hard, I mean hard. After football was over, at the collegiate level and both professionally, there was no one coming to me at the beginning of the week handing you a pamphlet going, this will be 60 to 70% of your life this week. And that didn't happen anymore. It blew my mind. I actually called our old director of football operations and said, hey, what do you think I should be doing? He's like, Chris, you're an adult. I don't do what you need.
Take care of your business.
Right, take care of what you're supposed to take care of. But it was one of those hard realities of where, okay, my prioritization is no longer my sport. It needs to be my family, my life, my children, my growth individually as a person, starting a small business. And athletics, I've always felt, helps a person do that. It truly helps a person sit down and go, okay, there's the practice, then there's the game, then there's the evaluation period. Sometimes that might be grim, okay? Sometimes it might be super positive. But either way, that's life as it is. And so I've always felt that athletics is something that always helps a person, a young athlete, prioritize. If you say it matters to you, then let your actions show it. And I think that's one of the biggest things in this country that helps people do it, above and beyond anything.
I think that's absolutely true. Okay, do we have any questions at this point?
I just wanted to make a comment that all of these skills that we're talking about, the social acceptance, prioritization, teamwork, commitment, all of that is a huge process for a Paralympic athlete. Anybody with a disability,
Yes.
all of those benefits are tremendous for them. And yet the opportunities for them are so limited that they don't get to grow as much as we wish.
Thank you very much for bringing that up. That perspective is so important for us, especially as we are today talking about systems, because I want to talk about it at the weeds level, but I also want us to think about what could we be doing differently? How could we be creating opportunities differently?
Line.
Yes, please.
What are the panel's thoughts on the effects of the cost of youth sports in regards to parent expectations and pressures? And what are some strategies to deal with the conversations of the value of life lessons and growth versus results?
I have some opinions about this.
Oh, do you have some things to say?
I think we probably all have some opinions about
Tell
this.
me.
You can go first.
I have some things to say about this, only because, and Deb, you and I have joked about this. I've often said to people, prior to about a year and a half, 2 years ago, when now they're offering flag football as a scholarship sport in many NAIA schools for women, I always tell flag football leads to nowhere. It leads to nothing. So don't think there's a Division I coach in the bushes or a high school coach from the private Catholic academy looking at, no. It's just us out here and basically a professionally run gym class. That's what it is, okay? We're having fun, all right? We've also fought as an organization to make sure it's affordable for parents to play. And what I mean affordable, I mean, for a 7-8 week season, you're looking at between $115 to $160. One of the biggest challenges that I'm seeing, especially within females in sports, is that the cost. You're taking something as simple as soccer. Somehow we've all twisted this as a country into becoming an affluent sport. Why is that? Well, part of the process is, and part of the problem is, at the collegiate level, recruitment budgets are so small. If you're a football team, if you're Alabama, if you're Clemson, if you're Pitt, the budget's unlimited. We could all be staff members. We can go travel the country, go see whoever for 1/4 of their game, come back home and say, that's the kid we want to offer. For female sports, it is not the same ball game. And oftentimes what Division I soccer coaches, volleyball coaches are subjected to do is essentially focus all their time and what little resources they have is on 8 to 10 national tournaments. Now here's the challenge. If your daughter or if in your household you don't have $3,000 to $5,000 expendable dollars to spend on that coaching and that club or that academy, your daughter's not getting seen.
And another $5,000 for the travel, and the hotels, and the...
Absolutely. And so what happens now is this. My wife and I and our kids, we live in the inner city. If for some reason our middle child becomes a world-class soccer player, we just don't know. But it gets to a point where, look, we just can't afford to do the whole club scene. We can't do it. University of Pittsburgh is right behind our backyard. Here they had a world-class athlete 2 blocks away. They never even saw her. Why? Well, because her parents didn't have enough money to send her to the national tournament that was taking place in Utah or wherever. And so it never happens. And this is one of the biggest challenges. In terms of sports, we've got to find a way to bring it back to its most primitive value, okay, at the lowest levels. And whether that be through funding, through a federal or state level, into YMCAs, Boys and Girls Clubs, schools, my goodness. The budgets don't grow. I don't care how affluent of a suburb you live in, and I don't care how urban of a community you come from. Athletic budgets never grow. And if there's growth in it, it's only happened from outside parent organizations, which are booster clubs. Every parent can't organize that way. It's a major problem.
It's the truth.
It is. And so to kind of add to that a little bit is that I think that to the question also, we when you think about kind of one big parenting piece of advice, it's focus on the process, not on the outcome, right? So it's not, oh my God, what a gorgeous picture, but oh, I love how you used green and blue and yellow in that picture. Because then what we're teaching is there's more to life than just the outcome, right? There's more to life than just the final product. And my worth is not based solely on what I produce. And I think that that's a lesson we have to go back to as like kind of parents involved with kids in sport. Hey, you did a great job on the field today. I loved how you passed the ball. And you and I were joking about Ted Lasso before, right? And I don't know if everybody's watched Ted Lasso, but I'm a huge Ted Lasso fan. And one of the things was Jamie Tart, who's the star, to pass the ball to the other player to get the goal, and how his father came after him and like got so mad at him, but what an important lesson, right? How did he win the next game? Because he passed the ball, right? So the outcome has to be not the primary thing, and I think that's the message we're forgetting, and I think that's the message we've been talking a lot about is what's the process? How are we reinforcing the process? And how are we continuing to praise the process, which might get you a better outcome? Right? Because now I am not only an athlete who's producing for you, I am an athlete who has lots of variable pieces to me that I bring something to my team that's really important, and you not only praise me, which then motivates me to do more. And I think that's a really important lesson for us to go back to. And I think that one of the other panels, I can't remember who said it, but parents need to check themselves and really need to, I say that nicely, are you a failed, I put in quotes, athlete yourself, and then you're like, but you're so much better than me, so you should be, so I'm putting my dreams on you, like Jamie Tart's dad, right, and Ted Lasso. But the fact is that your kids can't live your dreams for you, and so you have to figure out what your motivation is as the parent of an athlete, and I think really
so we're
check
coming
that.
back to purpose and process. And it seems like, I think it seems a little bit like we are dodging this question of incredibly expensive sport. We can't today solve that. And I, as a parent of an athlete, can't solve that. What I can solve for is remembering why my child is involved in sport, and if that thing is attainable, whether or not we pay for the super expensive thing that would put our rent in jeopardy. So if my purpose is to give my child opportunities to grow and be challenged and move and create relationships and work on teamwork, well, we can get that with any sports organization that shares those goals. So what I would say to parents is, if at all possible, while supporting your kids' hopes and dreams, stay connected to organizations that share your goals.
Yes.
Then, if you find other people in that situation, coaches and boosters and people who see that this is maybe one of those 1% of kids who are involved, and they might have a real shot, then all of you can brainstorm together about how to make it affordable. But don't start off by saying, I'm only gonna involve my child in the sport if I have $14,000 disposable dollars to put towards it yearly at least, because that's only supporting the do and not the who.
Can I touch on something?
Yeah, please.
One of the things that I'm in a very privileged position of being both a coach and an administrator of an organization. And oftentimes, because of the stigma over the last 5 to 10 years about tackle football has come on my doorstep, and I've had a lot of coaches with youth tackle coaches and with parents. And parents often come to me right around the time of middle school. And they'll say, hey, listen, Chris, my son's on me, they want to play tackle football. What do you think? First thing I always say is this: I love the game of tackle football. Tackle football has given me a life. I wouldn't be who I am or where I am today without that sport, number one. Number two, I say, interview the organization or program no different than you would do for a school you're getting ready to send your child to. And what I mean by that is, don't go to the games. The games are made to look good. Okay, it's like cheerleaders and
it's like going to the orientation.
Thank you. Don't go to that. Yeah, the marketing is out. You need to go on a Wednesday evening when it's raining or snow, and go see how coaches talk to your kids, or talk to someone else's kids before you put your kid with that organization. The reason being is because you can find good coaching and bad coaching in the most affluent suburbs of any city or state, and you can find good coaching and bad coaching in the middle of the hood in most states and cities around it, and rural areas. Do not let geography or economics determine who you will have teach your child a sport. And that's a critical aspect. And I know it's different for everyone in different parts of the country right now, but what you gotta do as a parent really is feel comfortable and find the confidence to ask the base level questions to get a better understanding around what the sport is. It's not about talking about, hey, are you running Bill Walsh's West Coast traditional offense, or are you running more of this RPO stuff that I'm seeing,
You just sounded like Charlie Brown.
Right. It's not about that. Listen, are you going to talk to my son the right way? Yes or no? Are
you in line with my values?
Right.
You know what I mean? I think that's important.
Are you in line with my values? Look, one of the things that we saw, and actually a moment that inspired the creation of this event, is that we saw athletes this summer in several different sports stand up and say the discomfort, I'd like to add, that they had endured that most of us would consider torture in pursuit of their goals. The discomfort that I have willingly, eagerly endured has turned to danger for me. That is my truth, and I'm going to take a step back until that is no longer the truth. They could identify the difference between tremendous discomfort in pursuit of a goal and actual danger to their future, to their very life. Okay, I want my kids to learn that differentiation. I want them to have that ability, no matter what situation. I have a son in the military. I want him to understand what is tremendous discomfort, and you shut up and suck it up and do as you're told, and what is actual danger, and you say, excuse me, sir, or excuse me, ma'am. Sport can teach that differentiation, but we as adults, we sometimes pull back, and we sometimes put our kids with people who pull back from admitting that there could be danger or doing anything that looks like coddling or protecting or enabling one of the athletes said, am I just being lazy? Am I just being wimpy? They didn't use that word. So if I'm looking for a coach, if I'm looking for an organization that matches my values, how do I ask? What questions can I ask another adult who's involved in sport? Because I'm ideally connecting my child to someone who's going to have a lot of power. It's going to be a voice in their head, who's going to be a hand on their shoulder, who's going to be giving them feedback, that evaluation period afterwards. How do I figure out what to ask when I'm interviewing them that helps me understand if they see the difference between discomfort and danger and are willing to address it?
Some of the baseline things that I've found over the years that work is telling parents this: listen, when you're looking to figure out, does your son or daughter play AAU basketball? Should they play tackle football? For what organization? Start with this. Talk to the main organization, director or head coach. Hey, by the way, is everyone certified in some regard on staff? Very simple, very low, just a very simple base level question. The second thing is, depending upon sport, every sport has different certifications that go. We'll take football. Hey, is everyone on staff heads up certified? That's one basic level thing you can ask. The reason being is because if they're not confidently saying, yeah, of course, why would they not be? If they're not giving you an answer that builds confidence in their organization as an administrator, as a director, or even in the fact that they care about the health and well-being of the child, you need to go to the next organization. And it varies for every sport. Every single sport has different kind of barriers to entry, and some are followed, some are not. Some coaches, quite frankly, are just simply leveraging what they were taught 30 years ago, and that will not fly. It won't.
Well, and I think I'm going to bring it down kind of a step from the coach's level of just like, how are we defining discomfort and danger, right? And I think that's an important thing. We saw these amazing athletes over the summer come out with their discussion of like, this is dangerous. And to your point, they know how to push the boundaries, but what do we know from that? And I'm thinking back to this morning of, Gracie talking about just her own experience of there were all of these signs, but were her coaches and her support team missing those signs and not asking, right? So there was discomfort. She was expressing discomfort of, something was going on and she wasn't getting to practice on time. So what's our automatic default? They're lazy, they're not working hard enough, they're quitting, right? Or I'm gonna make you do more because you're not doing enough. But then, did she have to tip into danger? So I think one question I might ask a coach is like, what are you looking for to make sure that my child, under your purview as their coach, is being and functioning the best they can? Not to say they're not gonna have an off day, not to say that they're not gonna have a rough time, but are you looking to see if they're showing up the way you're used to them showing up? And if it's one day and they're having a bad day, okay, right? But if it's a couple days in a row, how are you handling that? Are we doing, stair runs, or are you sitting down and saying, hey, this is atypical. No judgment, man, what's up?
TrueSport has asked all of the experts who've been involved in this day to create some resources, and there is a resource list. One of the activities, just as an example there, is for coaches and parents to think about their athlete or their athletes and look at a list of red flags, things that we all as youth development professionals know, damaging themselves through self-harm behaviors, substance use, damaging relationships, complete withdrawal, not eating, sleeping all the time, some obvious red flags, things where you would look at that young athlete and be like, okay, something is wrong. I may not know what, but something is wrong. To look at that list of red flags and then go a step further. Tap into your own expertise to figure out, knowing these athletes as I do, what are their yellow flags? What is a sign in this child that they are starting to feel overwhelmed, that they are beginning to struggle? And there's a guide in there to fill that out. So we are offering, as a part of our day-to-day, just some resources. We will develop more, and there are always amazing, amazing opportunities through TrueSport to get access to free resources that you can use in your experience with your athletes. But this idea of saying to a coach, what are some of the things you look for to let you know that you ought to be worried about your athletes? And then, and I think this is really important, then what do you do when you're worried? Right. Because we were told this morning by the athletes, you could accuse me, she didn't use the word accuse, but you could tell me I'm being lazy, I'm being late, or you could be curious. Hey, I noticed this. What's going on? Yeah. And I think that tip to let something that's a change make us curious, because maybe there's nothing going on and I am just being lazy today, but to approach it with curiosity and the gentleness that Deja mentioned is such an important way that we can allow somebody to be held accountable and feel seen at the same time.
And I think validation came up a bunch this morning with the athletes and I think we mix up validation and cheerleading. And so validation is, I see you, I hear you, I recognize that you're struggling. I wanna just say that validation does not mean you agree with them, right? You do not have to agree that showing up late is an effective way to let me know you're having a hard time, right? Or just blowing off practice is a way. But I can validate, hey, I see that you're really struggling. Validation. What can I do to help? Problem solve. That can be a sandwich. It's an open-faced sandwich, but it can be, it's a sandwich, right? But cheerleading is, hey, I know you've got this. You've got this. Well, you can make this. You've been here before. You've got this. When I'm feeling crappy, that feels like pressure.
Yeah.
That feels like, I'm just going to let another person down, and oh my God, and this is going to suck, and blah, blah. So validate, and you know you're cheerleading when validation is needed, when you get pushback or you see that person go, okay, thanks, and walk away. You see it. So when you see that, you'll be like, I needed to validate. Hey, man, I'm really sorry. I was really giving you some encouragement, but I think maybe what you need me to do is just be like, what's up? Are you okay? Yeah. So you can always pull back from that. Yeah. But that distinction is important, and validation lets someone know you see, you hear, you recognize, you understand they're struggling, and then opens the door for problem-solving conversation and change.
You've pointed out a problem that we sometimes have as adults, as parents and as coaches. We see a feeling that a kid is having. And it's clear that kid got a penalty or got called on by a ref, and they are frustrated. And we understand the frustration. Maybe it was a questionable call, or maybe it's just frustrating and embarrassing and shameful to have it happen. We see the emotion, but then they act out. They do something that we've told them not to do, or they know they shouldn't do, a behavior that we cannot endorse. And we think that by showing empathy for the frustration, we are retweeting the behavior. We are giving an endorsement of the behavior. But because we want our kids to be able to separate the feeling of shame or frustration from the behavior of throwing something or mouthing off, we have to model that by separating our empathy from the feeling from the consequences for the behavior. We still have to give empathy for the feeling. If we can't separate it, how can we ask them to?
And feelings are always valid. I'm sorry, I know you have something to say, I totally interrupted you. Feelings are always valid. You are entitled to feel anything you want. What you do with that feeling is where I might take issue, right? So if I'm really angry because something happened on the field and I'm playing football, and I come off and I knock over all the water and throw my helmet down, like that may not be acceptable, and that may go against your team values and you as a coach and as parents. But and so I can say, hey man, I get you're angry. That behavior is not part of how this team works.
And to your point, not but.
I said but, didn't I? And that behavior, thank you for the correction. And that is not, I'm so good at the and I totally screwed that one up. So, right, your anger is totally understandable. And that behavior is not acceptable on this team. So the next time this happens, because there will be a next time that you get angry and frustrated, let's talk about what you can do differently. And in the moment, really important, while they are at the peak of their emotional reaction, do not have that conversation because you are like throwing pebbles at their forehead. Their whole frontal cortex shuts off when they are stressed. This is true for all of us. High intensity emotion, our frontal cortex shuts off. Reason goes out the window. You need a little bit of downtime to have those conversations. We have them too soon, so just be aware of that.
In fairness to all the coaches too, and I do want,
Everybody's doing the best they can.
Well, no, and this is the thing. In fairness to coaches that are both watching online and those in the room right now, this isn't a call to action for them to become PhDs. But what I have always felt that it is a call to say, listen, I'm acknowledging that the demographic of athlete, young athlete, student athlete, young adult athlete that I'm coaching, quite frankly, is different than what it was 10 years ago. And so if you yourself know as a leader of an organization, as a head coach, as a position coach, or whatever, if you acknowledge the fact that you see an issue, at least be a good leader and say, let's get someone in here. One of the other panelists earlier today talked about how Coach Saban oftentimes will bring in different guest speakers, different panelists. And he's the first one up front because he's man enough to admit he doesn't know it all. This is a guy with multiple national champions, a proven track record of success. Part of that success is that he is the leader of the organization, realizes that he has to improve every single time, every single season. If we don't begin to approach sports in this way, not only as parents, coaches, and administrators, it's going to look different, unfortunately, in the very near future in terms of participation and overall output.
Okay, we're going to end our time together in just a couple of minutes by talking about the things that we're going to take away from this and what we're going to use forward. And so one thing that you're going to take away that you hadn't thought of, and one thing that you really hope everybody hears from you today. But before we do that, are there any more questions? Is there anything else that somebody online? Oh, I get that. Yes, fantastic.
What practical things can we do for older teens who have already been parented, coached in unhealthy ways? Looking at the win compared to improvement, tying their identity to their performance and things like that.
Oh, I want to take this one first.
Go for it.
I take this one first because the bad news about parenting is there's no finish line, and the good news about parenting is there's no finish line. So we're never done. It changes. We sure hope, right? The relationships change and the goals change and our role changes. But our influence, I can tell you as a 51-year-old woman who very much hopes that when my dad watches this, he's proud of me, our influence never ends. And so we always have the opportunity to tap into something that teens have been waiting to hear from us their whole lives. And that is, hey, I have been treating you younger than you are. And I have come to learn something new, and I'd like to approach something differently, and I'd like you to help me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think radically genuine, to me, I would call that a radically genuine conversation, right? And I think if I see a young person who's really in that space of like, this is who I am, we need to pull that apart. And I think it's a radically genuine, validating, hey, I see this is happening for you, and I see that your identity is really tied up with that. I'm concerned, right? I'm gonna model expressing my own emotional reaction. I'm concerned, I'd like to talk to you about how there's more to this and what that looks like for you. And I don't think it's a one and done. To your point, it's not a one and done. It's a, let's talk about it now. Emotions might rise. Let's come back to this in a couple days. We might have another, so I think it's a ongoing, open, don't preach, be open and sit back. My biggest piece of advice to parents very often is to listen more than talk. So open-ended question.
We recognize the irony as being up here just talking.
We do.
Talking.
But open-ended question, it's irony because I don't know when to stop talking, but open-ended question, I have to remind myself sometimes I sit on my hands to remind myself to be quiet. That's my own physical cue, but it works. And then people, give room for conversation.
Well, to answer, try to provide some degree of response to the question is this. Number one, as a coach,
Did we not do that?
No, of course. I want to add to it. I want to do my best to give.
Bring it home, Chris. Bring it home.
I want to do my best to give the coach's perspective,
Yes, please.
speak on behalf of them that are out there watching those in the room. Is the fact that, look, number one, coaching is hard. Number two, don't give up. Don't give up on a kid. We all as coaches, regardless of the sport, would love to have an athlete that is just ready-made and all they want to do is be obedient to our process and what it is we're trying to put out there in our approach. But the reality is this. I think we all, coaches, have all said at some point or another, I got to get this kid to unlearn these bad habits. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to find a way. We got to get them to unlearn these bad habits because you see the potential. Every coach can find and identify that potential in a young athlete, and it's critical that we don't give up on anybody. Yep. We got to keep fighting for that potential next Olympic athlete, next Paralympic athlete.
And on that, Chris, in your experience as a coach, can an athlete have been parented and continue to be parented a certain way? You engage with that parent and you try and help them see that you share the same values and this is maybe a different way to approach it, but they don't hear that. Can that athlete hear from this other adult, this coach in their life, just a different way of looking at things while still experiencing what they're experiencing at home?
I think it is possible, number one, but I also think it's similar to kind of what one of the other panelists made, the comment they made earlier. They said, hey, trust is kind of the new currency of coaches. It takes forever to build that force to trust, but it could take a bad incident to just burn it down. And I think what it is going to take going forward is a continuous effort to build that trust. And if in this situation that we're talking about, we're discussing right now, that coach or that team or that organization can get that child or a young athlete to see the process, love the process. And every now and then, if there's a state championship on the wall, that's good too, okay? But see the process and understand that the process is going to actually help you become a better young lady, a better young man in life after sports, because we all know the shelf life on this is, early 20s. I think success can be derived, no doubt.
For sure. Okay, Jen, what's something you took from today and something you'd like to give today?
Okay, so what did I take from today? I think what I took from today is the ongoing need for, and just a reminder to myself, right, that it's the process, not the outcome. I think that that's a super important lesson that we need to remind ourselves over and over and over and over and over again. And I think that that was a big theme through all of the panels we've had. And I think something I would like to leave with that was also a theme through some of our panels is the importance of validating people where they are. And I think that we cannot minimize the importance of validation, and we do minimize the importance of validation, and people just fundamentally need to be seen in whatever aspect of that is. So I hope everybody can kind of keep that in mind as they are interacting with people in their lives, because I think that you just build more cred when you can do that.
And because repetition is a learning tool, I want to reiterate what you said that I really heard, that is validating and cheerleading are not the same. You can validate an emotion even if you don't agree with it. Mm-hmm. Okay, Chris, how about you?
I think the biggest takeaway I got from this afternoon is finding a way for athletes to really align their goals and their positive gains from sports and athletics with the parental ones, and really kind of like bringing the parental ones to where the kids are. And what I mean by that is this. Oftentimes, I think today we're seeing young athletes are not loving the sport that they're in. They're loving what that sport can do for them. They're not asking themselves, what can I give to the game? They're saying, what can the game give to me? And it's difficult. This is an uphill battle because society tells us, whether it be through social media, through the media, just the traditional media outlets, that it's all about you. Go, go, go. Like, yes, Nike, you're awesome. So everything around this child today tells them, don't do that. But if they can find a way to align their goals and their parents' goals and their coaches' goals and their value, everyone's values get aligned on the same level, I think that's going to be a recipe for success. We're a long ways away from there. We are, as a society and as an athletic community. But I think we can all agree that there are those outlier situations, and typically those are the athletes that rise to the highest levels of competition. We got to find that way to get a bigger pool of athletes that can rise to the highest levels of competition.
Absolutely. I want to thank everyone who's been a part of this conversation today and the conversations that will just snowball from this event. Thank you very much to both of you. Will you join me, please, in thanking Chris and Jen?
Thanks, Deb.
Okay. We are almost to the end of our program. I'm going to invite Dr. Chapman, my amazing colleague, to come up, and he and I are going to just tell you just a couple of things that we took away from this time, and then Dr. Royer is going to end our time together. What did you think?
What did I think? Well, I'll say this. Just take like 5 seconds and look at the title of the summit. like really look at the wording. I mean, I think that this is a biased room, biased viewers, because in many ways, it takes a village. And I think that we know that it takes a village. You all care about your youth. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. And I think in many ways, we're trying to establish foundations so that we can be the ambassadors for the entire youth sport to take away in our respective communities, right? To enhance the well-being of our young athletes. So that's the biggest takeaway for me. It takes a village, and you all are part of that village.
1,500 people at least were a part of our conversation. And that's not even counting who we reached today on social media, the people that will be reached by those resource pages that I can see some people want to go back and share with their colleagues and say, hey, watch these conversations that happen because I want to make them a part of the conversations that we have here. What I took from it, I think, is really what you're saying. It's intentionality. We don't have to be perfect. We don't have to get it right every time. We can always see, oh, I did that thing. Didn't land quite how I wanted it to. I can model trying again. If we are just intentional about the path forward, then everybody's gonna rise with that. So I'm gonna give, the thing that I wanna give is that idea of remembering what's the purpose. And what I'm really gonna take from that is just to remember we always have a new opportunity. Every day is a new day to be intentional in these relationships and really help create generations of people that we want to be our leaders, not just our champions.
That's excellent. And the last thing I'll say is a plug for TrueSport in USADA. There's phenomenal resources on that website. And I'm talking coaches, parents, athletes, everything from nutrition to mental wellness. Everything that we've talked about, there is a resource for that. And we give how-tos like Dr. G did today in her panel. There's a number of how-tos. So I would plug TrueSport in USADA. Please check out the website if you haven't already. We're here to help you. We're here to serve you. And we're all in this together too.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for making it through a long day. Hopefully it was rewarding and we had great experiences and conversations that will be good takeaways for you. Thank you. Special thanks to Dr. Chapman and to Dr. Gilboa for offering their wisdom to this conversation. A couple of things I wanted to wrap up with. I wanted to let you know, to reiterate what Kevin just said, we are building a resource page. USADA TrueSport is committed to creating a start of this conversation. This is not the last time we hope to have these types of conversations. We have invited our expert panelists to help create actionable takeaways. So if you are a coach, a parent, an athletic administrator, somebody who wants to bring this back to your team, please check out truesport.org. Go to our event landing page, and there are a host of resources that we've begun to build, everything from articles, activities, videos. There's a ton of great stuff there, and we are committed to continuing to grow and build those resources. So we hope that you'll continue to check back with us. We do hope this is the start of an ongoing conversation about this. We're committed to doing what's right for the institution of sport. And I wanted to reiterate that from our team's perspective, a couple of takeaways is that we are gifted with the responsibility to care for the next generation of great athletes and great humans. And that responsibility is not something we take lightly. What your kid arrives to you with is not what they're stuck with. We want to embrace that growth mindset. Make sure that we're looking as adults that we're continually learning, that you're taking these lessons, you're going back and you're reapplying it, and we are teaching our young people that they have it within them to also continue to grow. So that growth mindset piece is huge for us. The second is that we are all about redefining success. Great sport is not always seen on a scoreboard. Certainly winning is valuable. The pursuit of success and the pursuit of winning is an admirable cause, but doing it in a way that embodies a stronger person is the way that USADA and TrueSport believe sport is best represented. And then the third piece that we wanted to talk about is the intentional development of great relationships, because none of this happens for an individual in isolation. No 10-year-old kid is going to walk in and go, you know what, today I think I'm going to get better at growth mindset. Zero chance, right? They might come out of a conversation with a trusted adult and believe, you know what, I didn't nail it today. Maybe tomorrow I will. I'm going to listen to these folks. They care about me. We're going to get better together. And if we can get those three things right, as an organization, as a society, as a community, we're a step closer to the almost unimaginable perfection that we want for our kids. So that's our hope. We hope that we've invested in that today. We hope you'll continue to invest in that conversation with us. We look forward to additional connections with us. Please check out the resource page. For those of you that traveled, Be safe going home, and we look forward to ongoing conversations with you in the future. Thanks so much.